the way they do all of this is incredibly delicate and nuanced. This movie rules.
This movie's really good. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the CineFix Top 100, our foolish dream that we're chasing from a small town to the big city, only to end up dead on a bus. I'm Clint Gage, and joining me, as always, IGN's Director of Video Programming, and the man who taught me how to steal to survive, Michael Calabro.
Hey, Clint, how's it going, dude?
It's going great, man. It's going great. Noticeably not joining us this week is our favorite Terminator 2 fanatic, Alex Stedman. Alex is out sick this week, so it's just left, it's down to us.
Let's not forget that Dan fucked off on vacation.
Dan is on vacation.
Yeah,
yes.
So, I mean, it's just the lunatics running the asylum.
Yeah, which is actually, so because we do not have some of our normal crew here, we are doing something a little different that we're calling the CineFix Not Top 100, because we don't have Dan or his algorithm here to tell us what to do.
Well, that's actually a lie. We do have the algorithm.
We do have the algorithm. Never leaves, never wavers, never changes. But the good news is we're going to take this opportunity to pick some movies that actually didn't make the cut.
Well, they didn't make the top 100.
They didn't make the top 100. They made our top 100s.
Yeah.
So this week we're going to talk about one movie that, in particular, didn't make it onto the top 100 at all, but it was on your
It is
list.
on my list, yes.
We're talking about Midnight Cowboy.
That's right.
Where's that Joe Buck?
Where's that Joe Buck?
You're due here at 4 o'clock.
You know what you can do with them dishes. And if you ain't man enough to do it for yourself, I'd be happy to oblige. I really would.
Let's be real, Clint. Who better to talk about Midnight Cowboy than like a handsome Texan and a greasy Dago from the Northeast?
Sure.
Like we got this locked down.
This is going to be a fascinating episode. This is straight from the horse's mouth, as it were. So yeah, I mean, again, these are and what I like about doing this too, and I think we need to make a habit out of mixing some of these in too, because they're like, listen, we all made a list of 100 movies. There's not really. There's some bangers on these low on our list.
Yeah, Midnight Cowboy being one of them.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to talk about them at all. Even if we do all 100 episodes of this show, like there would be some great movies that we wouldn't even get to talk about. Midnight Cowboy being one of them.
Yeah.
Any other? Did I miss anything else? Any other business we have to do up top?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Dan's gone.
Alex is
sick. The algorithm we're rebelling against. It'll probably check us back into our places this time next week, but we'll see.
Yep.
I think that's it. Oh, and the envelope is here too.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Is like that's why we know that the algorithm can never truly leave us, because it does have a ranking.
All we can do is add a scribbled Post-it note.
All I know is that it is not in the 100. It's somewhere floating in the ether above the 100. Where we'll find out at the end of the episode.
We will find out here in about an hour. But let's get to talking about Midnight Cowboy. 1969, directed by John Schesinger, Dustin Hoffman, and John Voigt. It's about a small-town Texas guy with dreams of becoming a wildly successful New York gigolo.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, I don't know why he left Texas, to be honest. It looks like he was a handsome Texan. And, I mean, like, he saved up enough money, working at that diner that he was able to afford that very nice, like, cowhide suitcase.
Yeah.
Which, like, honestly, if I could have one prop from this movie, that's what I want.
You need to go find an old school cowhide suitcase.
Yeah.
It is a hell of a suitcase for sure.
What a flex.
It's incredible. But the pedigree of this movie, like, this is a movie that it came out in 1969, but it won Best Picture.
Yep.
Best Director for John Schesinger. It also won Best Adapted Screenplay. A fellow by the name of Waldo Salt.
Oh, we're going to get into Waldo Salt.
Yeah, we'll get into Waldo Salt in a minute. But based on a book that had come out a few years prior to this.
It also is the only Best Picture winner to have the coolest rating.
Yes, which we'll get to that in a second, too.
Okay.
I want to talk a lot about that. It also got nominations for both Dustin Hoffman and John Voigt.
Deservedly so.
Yeah, deservedly so. Sylvia Miles got a Best Supporting Actress nomination.
Not going to lie, that's an odd nod.
Yeah, that was weird. We can get into her character in a minute, too. But the one that I really liked, the nomination that it got, was for Best Editing. Didn't win.
Didn't win.
Ended up losing out to a film called Z.
Never saw that one.
Which was a Costa Gravis film. So he's an interesting guy. So I'm sure it was.
I'm sure it's great.
I'm sure it's great. I've never actually seen it, but this film in particular is very well edited. Which again, it was just tease after tease after tease. Here, we're going to get into the editing of this film.
I have a lot
shortly.
of notes specifically about the editing in this film.
It's an incredible movie.
Yeah.
So just, I mean, digging into the pedigree just a little bit more, like Schlesinger as a director, like he came out of the theater scene, and this is like late 60s, some of the new Hollywood types showing up. Guys like Mike Nichols coming out of the theater to make movies as well. Like John Schlesinger was another one kind of that ilk. He did this. He did Marathon Man 5 or 6 years later. And then he worked real solid, more or less, right up until he passed away. He passed away early 2000s.
Really?
Yeah, his last credit was 2000.
What,
but movies like Pacific Heights and Eye for an Eye and like solid, just kind of thrillers that I remember seeing once when, nothing that really like made the impact that he did back in the 70s. Like, he never got back to that height.
Oh shit, Clint, you forgot Day of the Locust.
Day of the Locust? Yeah, see, these are all these,
solid
like,
Hollywood flick.
Like solid workmanlike
I didn't realize
thrillers.
he did that.
Yeah. No, but never quite the staying power of the Midnight Cowboy and the Marathon Man.
I mean,
early in
dude,
his
how
career.
many people have such a well-executed idea of they're going to be like, I'm going to take a Texan aspiring gigolo and pair him up with like a street smart Italian guy named Razzo,
Yeah.
and have them fall in love.
So good.
So good.
So good.
I mean, none of these other movies compare to this. And I mean, like, is this the segue to Waldo Salt, who also wrote one of the other like great grimy 70s New York movies, which is Serpico?
Yep.
Which,
But by the way, just the name Waldo Salt
yeah,
is just a wonderful name. Like he gets all of the credit just by being named Waldo Salt.
Oh.
His daughter, by the way, in this movie, Jennifer Salt.
weird role.
Yeah.
Not one I would have chose for my daughter, but you
Sure.
know.
Crazy Annie. Yeah.
Also, Waldo Salt also wrote Day of the Locust, which was directed by Schlesinger. So
Yep.
it's nice to see John and Paul team up again.
They stayed friends.
And he also wrote this other movie before Midnight Cowboy called Blast of Silence, which I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's about a hitman, like a Cleveland hitman that goes to New York to like bump off this like small time mob boss. It's really good. It's really cool. Like the beginnings of the French New Wave starting to seep into like low budget Hollywood pictures, right? But what's great is if anybody actually takes the time to like Google the trailer, the way the narrator in the trailer says, like, he says fancy women and fancy hoodlums.
This is the asphalt jungle. This is New York City, with its fancy women and fancy hoodlums.
Which
Fancy hoodlums.
just the term fancy hoodlum
Yeah.
is a great handle for anybody that wants it.
Yeah, at fancy. You can hit me up at fancy hoodlum.
And then like but it's really just like a sick black and white old school thriller.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, the other couple guys, Dustin Hoffman.
Who?
This is a fellow by the name of Dustin Hoffman.
Haven't heard of him.
He had himself a decade. Like, he did Graduate a couple years prior to this.
Yeah.
Then there's Midnight Cowboy. And then we were talking about this earlier. Like, I mean, you can just rattle off what he did.
Yeah, I actually have the list right here. You want
Do
me to
it.
rattle
Yeah.
off?
Yes, please.
I
Rattle.
can't imagine anybody having a fucking run or like a run like this.
Their whole career.
In a decade,
Yeah.
a little more, in 13 years. The Graduate in 67, that pretty much is like that, and Bonnie and Clyde kick off like the birth of New Hollywood. Does a couple of less than classics in between some of these movies, but nevertheless, like, comes back in 69 with this film, Midnight Cowboy. After Midnight Cowboy, he is in a Arthur Penn, the director of Bonnie and Clyde's movie called Little Big Man, where he plays the sole survivor of Little Bighorn. After that, he plays my personal favorite Sam Peckinpah movie, Straw Dogs.
Yeah.
After that, he does...
That movie will put hair in your chest.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Shit. All right. Anyway, after that, in 73, he does Papillon. Did I say it right?
Yep.
This is the
Papillon.
only one on this list that I haven't seen yet.
It's him and Steve McQueen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like escaping from a prison island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After Papillon, he does Lenny, which is an excellent biopic
Biopic, yeah.
on Lenny Bruce, the comedian, that is directed by Bob Fosse. Fosse or
Fosse.
Fosse?
Yeah.
It's Fosse?
Yeah.
Anyway, all that jazz guy.
Right.
This is the movie he does before that. This movie fucking rules. It's so cool. It's really good. After that, he takes on the federal government in All the President's Men in 76. Same year, teams back up with Schlesinger for Marathon Man. And then
Is it safe?
Yeah. And then 3 years later, Kramer versus Kramer.
And then that stops before he gets to the 80s that he kicked off with Tootsie, which is another. Like, this point is, in that stretch of time, like, that's a whole career.
Listen.
That is a whole career that he just rattled off in the span of about a decade. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, careers were literally built on one of these movies.
Yeah. John Voigt, on the other hand, I mean, he worked steady after that, like before and after that. He was one of those guys that, like, I think Harrison Ford was kind of in this crowd too, like the guys that did guest spots on Gunsmoke and then subsequently became stars. There's like a weird list of, like, a fraternity of movie stars that came out of guest starring on things like Gunsmoke, and they played 4 different characters or something like that. John Voigt was kind of one of those guys. He did that. He did this. He did Deliverance a few years later. And then he just worked nonstop. But nothing, for me, it is a complete blank stretch of John Voigt between Deliverance and Mission Impossible. When he became, like, rich villainous power broker guy and, like, leaned into that with Mission Impossible and Enemy of the State and like that late 90s run, even I would argue Varsity Blues,
where he's
like,
the coach.
Texas high school football coach counts as rich villainous power.
I mean,
broker.
that's just. I mean, like, let's be real. Like, that's just good casting too, right? Like, let's get Joe Buck to play the high school football coach.
Yeah,
I will say this though, like, my dad would come up onto this stage and talk about how Mickey Donovan is, like, the greatest character ever. And then secondly, like, while John Voigt doesn't have the list of bangers like Dustin Hoffman does, like, his contributions to movies like Heat and Mission Impossible are, like, indelible. Like, he's 10 minutes, he can do a lot with, like, 5 minutes of screen time. But I will say that, like, Deliverance and Midnight Cowboy are absolute bangers. Yeah. And Catch-22, I don't know if you're a World War II guy, but, like, Catch-22 is a solid adaptation.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, but again, like, there's young John Voigt in Midnight Cowboy and Deliverance, and then there's old evil John Voigt.
Yeah.
They're, like, peppered in with, like, Nick Cage's dad, John Voigt, from the National Treasure movies or whatever, but, like, those barely count. Like, there are 2 versions of John Voigt, and there's just a complete blank spot in my brain in between those, even though he was working the whole time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
his IMDb is long.
Yes, it is.
We're also forgetting about one of the better John Voigt roles, which is his cameo in Seinfeld when George Costanza buys John Voight's LeBaron.
Buys his old LeBaron. Yeah. It's John Voight's LeBaron.
Yeah.
That's the most important John Voigt role.
I agree.
Which, like, but that was in the era when, like, that would have been in that era prior to Heat and Mission Impossible, probably, right?
Yeah, right before that.
Right before he
that
blew
would
up
have been
again,
early
because
90s.
like, for him to be the butt of a Chrysler LeBaron joke on Seinfeld, like, that's where he's at.
Yeah.
And then he goes on a really hell of a run, rich villainous power broker guy.
John Voight, the actor?
That's right. He just happened to be the previous owner of the vehicle.
You bought a car because it belonged to John Voigt?
No.
I think yes. You like the idea of telling people you're driving John Voight's car.
All right, maybe I do. So what?
The other thing, like, when we're talking about the pedigree of this movie, the legacy of this movie, the other thing we can talk about real quick before we dive into some of the art of the scene, brilliant moments type of stuff, the rating of this movie.
Yes, let's talk about it.
So this is officially on the record. This is the only
Best Picture
X-rated movie to win Best Picture. But
it's rated X.
It's rated X. But that's not really the whole story behind it being rated X.
Now, based on research we did on the internet, it was actually rated R. And then here's where, like, the gap in, like, the narrative, like, lapse, right? Is, like, so the studio, I guess, hired some psychologists to, like, analyze the film, and just based on, like, the gay undertones and stuff like that, they recommended it would be rated. They recommend it be rated X.
Yeah.
So the studio just, didn't want to cause some shit, because, like, I mean, again, the Hays Code is probably still like a warm dead body.
It's
at this point.
It is a not distant memory because the Hays Code officially left. 63, 64, something like that. So it was just in recent memory. But then but even that was like studio self-imposed kind of thing. So the habit of playing it safe as the studio was still very much in effect. But the other interesting thing, that was different at the time, like R-rated movies were it was basically the PG-13 of the 60s, right? It was, if you were 14, you could get into an R-rated movie.
God.
So it's a little different. So rated X was basically just like, we don't want 14-year-olds to come see this movie. So it wasn't, because like looking at this movie now by today's standards especially, it is nowhere near rated X. Like,
I mean, even at the time, they re-rated it R like a couple of years later.
Yeah. Back in those days, a rating like an X rating wasn't exactly what it means today. It wasn't porno, and particularly because anything that's on HBO,
the porn industry trying to make it.
Yeah, right.
This is the heyday of Boogie
the 60s,
Nights.
by the way, fascinating time for movies. Fascinating. Which I feel like we're gonna keep bringing that up slowly but surely the whole time. But it's funny because like R was 14 and up back then, and then it was all the way into the early 80s when you get like Poltergeist and Temple of Doom and things like that.
It's kind of weird.
Got the PG-13.
It's kind of weird to think you can like a 14-year-old could have gone and see Bonnie and Clyde in theaters without parental consent.
Yeah.
And Easy Rider.
Mm-hmm. And they would have totally understood it. I'm thinking because that was, and this is the other thing about this movie. Like, it was on AFI's Top 100, the first time that they did their Top 100 back in the late 90s, and so I was 16 when that dropped.
Hell yeah.
So like I was a teenager watching Midnight Cowboy without parental supervision because they didn't card me at Blockbuster. So that was the last time I'd watched this movie. Was when I watched it when I was working through that entire AFI list in high school. So I was 16, 17 years old when I watched it. And I'm watching it now again. It's so much better than it was when I was just cruising through it as a teenager.
I mean, it was actually that good then too. You're just you just didn't have enough folds at the moment.
Do you think it's me that changed, not the movie?
No. I think the movie
41-year-old Clint different from
Actually, Schlesinger has just been recutting it ever since, despite the fact that he died in 2003.
Yeah. But anyway, it's a fascinating thing. It's an X-rated movie. I think it gets a little revisionist history is not the right word, but it was just a different rating system back then. But it still holds the title for only X-rated movie to win Best Picture.
I mean,
Worth
deservedly
it.
so.
Yeah.
Another notch in its cool belt.
Yeah, exactly. You want to start talking about the movie now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's talk about brilliant moments here.
All right.
I want to start talking just immediately about the title sequence.
Let's do it. That was where I wanted to go first. So.
Right out of the gate. It's a great example of one of my favorite things. It's kind of a lost art to me. You don't see it a whole lot anymore, but like no dialogue, no scenes. I mean, there's a little bit, but just kind of incidentally in this movie. But the way that the title sequence establishes everything you need to know about this guy is incredible. Yeah. Like just showing you the setting, images of the town, him walking and getting on a bus and saying bye to people, and you get the sense of this guy and where he's coming from immediately while you're doing the business of the opening titles. Yeah. And it's great. It reminds me that, like, Dog Day Afternoon is another great example of this. Hal Ashby did it in The Landlord, of just like, there's this title sequence that completely establishes the wealth disparity of a gentrifying neighborhood. Yeah. We're like doing that as we're watching the opening titles.
I mean, it's like just amazing, right? Like these guys were like contractually obligated to have these opening credits, and they were just like, "Yep, we're gonna still manage to push the narrative forward here."
Yeah, I loved it.
Like, it's so good, and like we're gonna be talking about it a lot, but like we might as well talk about the Harry Nilsson song "Everybody's Talking."
Yep.
Right. Like. Just like even just the lyrics as he's just like walking around town, like everybody's talking at me. I don't hear a word they're saying, only the echoes in my mind. So it's just like this guy. It's just like told a couple of people, I'm gonna go off. I'm going off to New York to become a big gigolo, and everybody's like, you sure you want to do that? And he's like, yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he's got that conversation with a cook that he was working with in the diner. He's like, yeah, there's lots of rich women, and they're paying for it.
I have that in my most quotable lines.
Yeah. The cook is just like, I don't know, man.
I do believe he refers to the men of New York City as tutti fruttis.
Tutti fruttis. Yeah, that's a different thing about the '60s.
Oh, yeah.
There's, which we can address that right now too. Like it's by today's standards, of course, like it,
Horribly homophobic.
Yes, incredibly so. It didn't to me feel like the writer was writing it for the sake of it.
Absolutely,
like, it felt at home in the characters. Like you make a movie about these two guys that's set in 2023, and they're still throwing around those words.
Yep.
And but that's the type of person that they are. It wasn't like a judgmental stance that the filmmakers were taking. Like,
no, definitely not.
It was very much in character, but still, it is
At the
a lot.
end of the day,
And
this is a movie about two men who very much love each other, and it can probably be legitimately debated if they were actually partners.
yeah, they might have been.
Yeah,
Who knows?
is that what it looks like in Texas?
Honestly, one town over from me.
Yeah.
Looks a lot like that. Yeah.
Like, I always found it strange, like in like those Texas towns where it's like you have the main drag, and then they have not parallel parking. They have it just like pull in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of angled.
Yeah.
A little bit.
So you just kind of like
Yep, we got that on the square.
far out, man.
So then we get straight into, I mean, that title sequence trick of like moving the narrative forward, like it's efficient.
Let's be honest, man. There's a lot of montage in the beginning of this movie. It gets a lot of narrative.
There's a lot of montage
throughout.
throughout.
Because like not only is the opening credit of him just like walking around town, but then like the next like what 5 minutes is him taking a bus to New York City, which is also just all montage.
The bus ride, yeah. I mean, the title sequence ends with him getting on a bus,
Yeah.
and then the bus ride itself is another montage for, I think it might be 15 minutes. Like, I mean, it's a
long.
chunk of the movie. And this to me is where the editing really starts to shine.
Yeah.
Because the sequence on the bus establishes something that winds up being very important through the rest of the film, and that's distinguishing real time, what's taking place in the present, what he's imagining, what he's dreaming, and what he's remembering. Right? They're all four of those.
There's reality, there's memory, and there's fantasy.
Yeah.
And those things are intertwined and edited and juxtaposed in very fascinating ways throughout the film, which I think is agreed.
And distinct, too.
Yeah.
Like, exactly what he's remembering or what he's imagining doing. There's a sequence that comes up later. The first time Rico hustles Joe, which is hilarious. And then Joe is imagining chasing him down. He's running through the streets, but parallel, he's also imagining running through the streets and catching up with Rico and like choking him out. But then also while he's doing that, he's remembering a different time where he was running through the streets in his own past and like traumatic things that happened to him.
Well, he was getting chased there.
He was, sure. But so he was getting chased, and so like you're left with this really fast-paced montage where number one, it is completely clear like what's happening when and whether or not it's real. And then also you're left with the impression of this guy who he's angry, he's confused, he's remembering a time when he was traumatized, and he's having those feelings again, but also he's mad and he's going to kill a guy if he gets his hands on him. Like, so it's just this incredible, the way the film is cut and shot too, because they do some cool effects with the look of the film stock too. But it's just this fascinating like scattershot approach that really feels like the echoes of your mind.
Yeah, I agree. Right? Like I think that's kind of what is so good about the editing in this film. You just took my next point, which was that.
Go right ahead.
Which was that.
Or you could call it a segue.
No. I'm just gonna embellish.
Embellish.
I'm gonna embellish, right? So it's like we're talking about like the Everybody's Talking song, and like that song is a metaphor, just echoes through the edit of this film, and it's just like fascinating about how like we said, like it takes the present reality, it takes fantasy, and it takes memory, and it just like mixes it together as this guy's life is just deteriorating, but he doesn't really, I don't know, accept it. And it's like there's just so many weird like editing juxtapositions. Like when he first sleeps, like when he finally falls asleep at like Rizzo's in the tenement building, like the abandoned tenement building, right? Like there's like the scenes where like he's getting pulled off of Jennifer Salt's character, right? And honestly, this is probably like the weirdest editing juxtaposition in the film, or at least in my mind. I was just like, oh god damn, this is some fucked up shit right here, right? They're having him pulled off of like Jessica Salt, then they're parallel editing that with him getting spanked by his grandmother as a little boy, and then they're parallel editing that with an enema.
Yeah.
And it's just like
that's the other thing that we didn't touch on, that the opening sequence establishes there's like this incredibly bizarre dynamic that he has with his grandmother.
That shot where he's massaging his grandmother in like the beauty shop when he's just like walking downtown, and
and she's getting downright orgasmic about it. It's strange.
Horny grandma is like one of my key points in it.
We'll get to horny grandma in a minute, but before we do,
we also need to talk about how Rizzo's fantasy, and how delightful, utterly delightful.
So, and just in the way that Joe, because Joe is very much our protagonist for the whole movie, but Rico is very much the second chair. But he gets a moment. We get to kind of float into his perspective for this time, where we get to a point in the movie where he, first of all, Joe is a terrible hustler.
Yeah, we're gonna get. Let's not dwell on that.
Yeah,
just know he's waiting outside while Joe's failing yet again.
They think they've got their ticket. Yeah. Like Rico thinks that like this is the version of this plan that's really gonna work, and here we go. And then he's waiting outside in the street, imagining himself in Miami.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
My favorite shot of the film is actually from this entire sequence, which is, as he's doing the montage, like he has to get the buffet ready before everybody can eat. But specifically, the shot where Joe Buck is just sitting down and then the camera pans over and it's just Rico like rolling dice with all of these old women, just like rolling bones with the grandmas. Is f***ing incredible. And there's this woman that is in the upper right part of the frame, like she's like on the right of Rico, and she's just got this fucking white fur coat covered in jewelry, has got a fucking gangster roll in her hand that she clearly does not give a shit if she's ready to lose, and she has like the cigarette and like the Hunter S. Thompson fucking cigarette holder, like and like the nose guard, and like this old lady,
like before the zinc oxide, they just put like cardboard over their nose to keep from getting sunburned, I guess.
Because like this grandma is just balling.
Yeah.
Like,
what it seems like to me is they had a table of props for this group of ladies, and this lady showed up first and was like, "Oh, these are my props," and then she just put them all on.
I don't know.
It's just the fur coat and cigarette holder and everything.
I don't know when they painted the dogs playing poker.
Yeah.
Like painting, but now like this is like the old lady version of dogs playing poker, and it's just like these old ladies just standing around grandma's throwing bones, and like Rico just like facilitating, and everybody's just having time.
And there's also parts of that fantasy where he's just walking through, and he's walking through like pushing an old woman in a wheelchair, I think, and he's just walking through, and he's like looking up at the hotel, and there's women standing on the balcony just like with bills in their hands, just saying, "Hi Rico, hi Rico," and just it's so specifically funny that this is his heaven. Right.
There's two shots in that film, like in that sequence, that like not only is it like Rico's heaven, right, but like speak to him as a character. Like one of the shots is him getting his shoes shined.
Yep.
Right. And like we know, we'll probably talk about it later about how like one of the main scenes is when like Joe Buck is like when they're in the subway, they break in and shine his shoes. But the other one, and that's like while I think that I absolutely 100% want an oil painting of Rico playing dice with the old ladies, like hanging above my couch in my living room, like the actual like heartbreaking moment of that where you like really feel for him as his fantasy. It's like maybe the opening shot where you see like Joe Buck like running down the beach.
Oh, he's like
and then Rico gets up and runs with him, and it's just like, oh, he can run. Like he doesn't have like the gimp anymore.
And Joe is like running like, I don't know, either like a 9-year-old boy or a golden retriever.
Yeah, he does that,
he's
like, weird
just
heel click.
Like, he does that weird like kind of hop and like hey.
I mean, that's how I start every one of my runs.
Exactly. Every time I'm on the beach, I'm exactly that.
Well,
happy.
you know what? You know why he has to run like that? He's wearing pants. Like, people running in like normal clothes, you always just assume something's wrong because like no one ever like. If you ever see someone running in jeans, they did not plan to be running at that moment. Right? So like, he's wearing nice pants.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't have a shirt on, but like you have to make it look fun because if you just see someone running in pants, they did not.
Yeah. That's like, this is me being spontaneous.
Yeah.
Like, because I did not intend to run. Yeah.
Don't run from Jesus.
So can we move on to what I think is the oddest but low key most hilarious part of this?
Yes, please.
Sexually active grandma.
Sexually active grandma. Okay, let's get back into the sexually active grandma stuff.
It ruined Joe Buck's entire life.
Frisky grandma. Yeah,
Frisky.
absolutely.
Oh, frisky grandma is even better. That sounds like an Aubrey Plaza
Grandma's
movie.
got herself a new beau. Here's $3. There's a TV dinner in the fridge. Like, it's just.
I mean, is that like the invention of like the latchkey kid?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that was a new invention, right? Maybe that was just a new name for it.
I don't know. It's Texas. It's like home of like the mega churches and moral values. And here's grandma just being like,
small towns gotta get their kicks too.
I guess so. But like, I think like what's so great about this is like how they like kind of dole it out, right? Like, so like in the opening scene, it's just like he's sitting in the beauty parlor and you watch him massage his grandma, which is like, a pretty good euphemism for like being a gigolo, right? And then like it kind of like dulls out like all the you're the most handsome cowboy in all of Texas, or like
there's that fine line between like just doting grandmother and like a little pervy.
Definitely,
it doesn't take much to like jump the other side of that line in terms of how they portray it, right?
Yeah,
and what they cut it with.
And that's the thing, right? Yeah. And that's why we're still continuing to talk about I haven't seen Z, so I can't account for it. But I still maintain that the best editing Oscar was a robbery, because like the way they do all of this is incredibly delicate and nuanced, and like I feel like I came out of this movie with a complete understanding of how weird and fucked up Joe Buck's relationship is with his like main guardian, which is his grandma. Yeah. She's like the reverse psycho grandma.
Yeah.
Because like where Norman Bates' mother was like, like just hated the idea of him even having a partner.
Right.
She was just like all around town. Grandma's got a brand new beau, which is a great song title.
Those couple of shots. Yeah. It's the follow up to like Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a couple of shots where you see it where the three of them are in bed to like grandma's new beau with a bottle of beer.
Yeah, she's
in like her night dress, and then little Joe is just sitting there in between them laughing. They're all laughing, having a good time, and in a certain degree that looks like a healthy. Like they're all happy together. He's a part of, but then also you tie. Well, but like it looks like it's not like.
I remember getting in bed with my grandma and her boyfriend.
What I'm saying is the other version of that is the kid waiting, like getting kicked out of the like wait outside, and then listening to his grandma and her new beau like go at it, and then like he's mistreated. Like she very clearly loved him in her way, and like but then you couple that with the massage stuff, the enema stuff. Like they start to dole out, like you say, really delicately the fringes of that dynamic that are actually really disturbing, and actually inform his want. And by the way, like every woman that he goes after is an older woman.
Yeah.
And so like it's clear that he's
got a type.
He's got a type, and it's his grandma. It's Frisky Grandma.
Frisky Grandma. He's been chasing that Frisky Grandma.
Yeah.
All through the country.
You got to chase that Frisky Grandma high.
From Texas to New York City. Mm-hmm. It's just a strong underpinning of the motivations of Joe Buck, and like some of the visuals that they concocted, and to your point, right, like the way that they dole them out, and it's just like spaced out. it paints a wonderfully detailed portrait of Joe Buck over time that is just like nuanced and up in a way that I just don't think we get in movies.
And by the way, the only time that he even mentions his grandmother, he asked, there's once or twice, maybe 3 times, but a couple of them are really innocuous. Like he asked a guy on the bus, did you know my grandmother, Sally Buck? And I think he mentions her name again later. And then he also mentions to Rico that something about, it's when Rico's talking about his dad dying, and then Joe mentions like, oh, my grandma didn't even tell me when she died, and it cuts to him sitting on the porch and the house is foreclosed. He's come back from the war. He's in a military or
that's right,
basic or something like that. He's in military dress.
Do you think that's Korea?
In '69, it would have had to have been something like that.
Would have been early for Vietnam, right?
Or maybe he just enlisted and was done with it, or
like
something.
Who knows? How old is Joe Buck? Is Joe Buck early 20s or is Joe Buck early 30s?
He's got to be early 20s, I think.
You think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Early mid 20s.
Honestly, like with these late 60s movies and stuff like that, I can't tell anymore.
Yeah, everybody looked 35.
Yeah,
from the
like
time
Dustin Hoffman in The
school.
Graduate apparently just like got done with college. He looks like 35.
Yeah. And then 2 years later, he's playing Rico, and there's just no telling.
Yeah.
All they do all of that work establishing his relationship, as weird as it is with his grandmother. They don't say it. Ever. There's nothing explicit about it. It's all implied with the editing, which is again like, you know, the editing's better than the script, I think. I mean, the script, I suppose, because that's the other thing I wanted to talk about in the bus ride sequence, because this is based on a novel, right? In the bus ride sequence, we get the first hints of maybe why he's leaving. Yeah. There's his personal goals that he's very excited about going to New York to become a gigolo. There's that great moment when they get close to town and his AM radio is finally picking up New York broadcasts. Yes. And there's a guy interviewing women on the street about like, what's your ideal man? Like, and the first one that he hears is like, well, it's Gary Cooper, but he's dead.
But like they
such
rattle
wonderful foreshadowing.
They rattle up a couple of things before he's like, "That's me."
Yeah. There's 4 or 5 of them that aren't him, and then somebody finally yells like, "Yeah, outdoorsy type and tall," and he's like, "That's me. I did it."
Excuse me, ma'am.
The way that they establish his life, like his relationship with Crazy Annie, they start to float through that and start to introduce what happened there, which is clearly he and his buddies, like Crazy Annie had a bad reputation in town. She slept around, I guess. Yeah. And he and his buddies, his buddies were like tormenting her, but she loved Joe, and Joe, you get hints of it. You never fully get the whole story.
That's the only thing I don't completely understand is that story. And I guess, I mean, either I'm an idiot, which is very possible. So, like, please, anybody that is watching this podcast and actually knows the story about Crazy Annie, please let us know in the comments what actually transpired there. But I'm just assuming it's supposed to be abstract, and we're not supposed to fully know.
And I think that's the point of it, and that's the point that the film is trying to make, right? Like, I don't even think Joe is quite sure what happened there, you know? And so if Joe is our narrator, then there's no way that we shouldn't have a clear picture of it either, because I think he was just as confused about what happened as anybody. But the point, like, this is adapted from a book. So, like, how many chapters of the book was that bus ride? You know, or the events that he's remembering in the bus ride. Like, I mean, that's the thing. It makes me want to watch the book just so I can, watch the book.
When are we going to get the what's the difference?
I'm working on it. It's not a bad one, actually.
Yeah, I know it's not.
I'm gonna do. Because I do want to read the book now, because it'd be specifically because of the editing of this movie. Nothing to do with the screenplay. I feel like the thing that I like the most about this screenplay is the restraint that it showed in not explicitly dialoguing all that stuff, right? Like, which is why the edit is that much more impressive to me.
I'm new here in town, just in from Texas, you know, and I'm looking for the Statue of Liberty.
We're talking about the nuance and how information is doled out slowly. The other part of the film that's more explicit about that, but still does a really good job, is Joe sucks as a hustler. Yeah. And this absolute worst hustler ever.
Let's talk about the first encounter that he has. Yeah. With
excuse me, ma'am, you know where the Statue of Liberty is?
You don't want to see the Statue of Liberty at all, do you? So the first woman that he actually sleeps with is Sylvia Miles' character, Cass.
Great performance. Got her a Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress.
Like
there.
Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love levels of like the ratio of screen time to nomination is incredible.
Yeah.
Like she's not in this movie much at all, but it is a really pivotal moment in the movie because like he's so bad he ends up paying her.
Yeah. She gets him for cab money.
Yeah, and takes a $20 bill just out of his wallet
And
while
like
she's crying. And he
$20 in like 1969.
Yeah, that is. I kind of wonder what if they were to update it to now. Like, would he be handing out $100 bills?
Interesting juxtaposition, right? She got him for $20 for cab fare, and like later in the movie, when he finally does close a deal, Ratso got $1 for cab fare.
He
So,
tacks
like,
on $1 for his own cab.
So like, how much does a cab? Listen, I lived in New York City for like 5 years. I had to be bleeding to get into a cab, right? I was subway all the way.
Yeah.
F train for life.
There you go.
But like, how much of a difference is there? Like, she needs $20 to get wherever the hell is she going? Where's she going? Like JFK? And like Ratso needs $1.
Yeah, she's gonna take a cab to Philly for $20, I think.
Yeah.
But but yeah, the fact that he is just so bad at this is wonderful. And even, I mean, some of that speaks to like what we were talking about him on the bus, and maybe he doesn't exactly get what happened with Crazy Annie. He doesn't understand why all of that went down. And he doesn't understand much of anything. He's just an idiot. He's just, he is the puppy that we saw running on the beach in Rico's fantasy.
Yeah.
Right.
He really is that. Yeah. Cause I mean, like, that's just like fuck up one, right? Then like he meets Ratso, Rizzo, whatever. Right. And like that whole scene where like such an amazing shot of just like the tracking shot where Rizzo's like, yeah, you need management. Like, you know, like I'm going to set you up, but I'm like, you know, you're going to get set up. You're going to get set up with a guy like with O'Daniel, who's going to give you tons of money. Like, what am I going to get? What am I going to get for my time? I need $10.
Yeah. I need $10 right now. I need $10 when I introduce you.
And then the whole time he's doing that, they're just like walking down like a row of payphones, and he's fucking checking, like hanging it up, checking for change in every one.
Those details are incredible. There's also a shot in that sequence that I love where it opens at a restaurant, and there's a tray of a milkshake and a martini. And that's what that motivates the camera move that then catches up with them walking on the street outside of that cafe. And it's just that disparity of just like, I mean, the idea of a milkshake and a martini, and then we cut to Joe Buck and Rico is also really funny. It's
incredible. So then, you know, later in the film, he decides to turn some tricks like in Midtown, and like he picks up Bob Balaban, a young Bob Balaban,
the youngest Bob Balaban,
who decides to go down on him in a movie theater. When he tries to get paid for that, Bob Balaban has no money, just some school books, you know, just a Tish kid looking for tricks. And he offers to give him his, and then like Joe Buck tries to take his watch, but then after listening to Bob Balaban's sob story, decides not to take it. So like, you won't even take the kid's watch.
Well, and that's the thing about this movie as a whole to me is like there's no like overriding lesson or morality play. It's just like tragic stuff happening to regular people, right?
Yeah.
And every one of these moments where Joe Buck is bad at being a gigolo, is the result of it is like him realizing how tragic the other person that he's in that moment with is.
Yeah,
and then like he can't be, you know,
he can't be mad at them.
Cass blows up and she gets upset and she's sad and he's like, let me help, I'm gonna fix this. And then the same thing with Balaban in the bathroom, like he's ready to beat him up, and he's gonna steal his watch, and that's gonna be the payment. And Bob Balaban's like, my mother will kill me if I come home without this watch, and he gives the watch back, and he's just, like, he can't bring himself to inflict more pain on these people.
Soft Midwesterners is what it is.
So I mean, it's just you can't be
and that's only just the next step. Then we get to the next phase of that, right? And that's when Ratso gets in on the deal, right? And Ratso, you know, typical New York hustler, understands at least how the world works above like 34th Street, right? He goes to the gentleman escort service and like pickpockets like basically like pickpockets like one of like I guess an actual gigolo's pocket on the lead.
Yeah.
And then like gives it to Joe, and then like Joe fucks it up in the lobby by grabbing her ass in that hotel lobby, and she slaps him in the face. And that's like the whole
Because
like
Joe thinks this is the sure thing.
yeah. I mean,
this is great.
dude. The whole time I'm watching that sequence, all I could think about is Glengarry Glen Ross, and it's just like Alec Baldwin. The leads are weak. These are the Glengarry leads, and it's like you're weak. Like he couldn't even close the deal. She called for an escort, and Joe Buck couldn't close.
Yeah.
Rizzo drops him off. He's like, I did it. I hustled. I figured
He's
this hustle
already in
out the
Florida.
New York way.
Yeah.
And he's already in Florida.
Yeah.
And then Joe Buck's there to it up.
He just messes it up. What's great about that string of complete failures ends with the party.
Yes.
So this is the party sequences, and this is the other kind of the last brilliant moment I just want to talk
I have a
about.
couple of rapid fire ones I want to go with you that don't have like this kind of long of an arc, but we'll go rapid fire after this. I want to talk about the part.
The party sequence is great because there's a vein of late '60s acid trip party sequences.
The Andy Warhol's Factory.
Warhol's Factory. Easy Rider had one in the cemetery. Like those like weird trippy party sequence montages are kind of my kink. Like I love watching these parties that just like camera floats around, grab like the way into that. It's floating around, catching snippets of conversations that don't matter to the plot.
Yeah,
it's just atmosphere stuff. This is the like. And the way that they cut in, there's a guy wandering around with a 16mm camera, and they cut some of that footage straight in, and the way that they frame that is interesting too, because they use the 16mm with the curved edge, 4x3, but then they also behind it have it blown up and out of focus, the way that we cut in comic book panels in our edits.
Yeah, we've talked about that for a minute, like how you actually go about doing that practically.
This is one of those things. Like I understand MP3s and I understand digital everything. Like I could go do that in Premiere 3.5 minutes. That's fine. It's easy. I don't have a clue how a record works. Like a wax thing with grooves in it and little bumps sounds like the Rolling Stones. Like that blows my mind. I don't know how they do that. So like photochemically, how they cut together that 16, and they even added a zoom into the frame at one point. And
I think our standing theory of how it was done was double negative exposure, right?
Yeah.
So they projected the film onto a screen, blurry.
Mm-hmm.
Photographed that, but had a black frame, like had a mat behind a mat right in the middle, and then they reprojected it again, but with it just in the and that's how they. I don't know how they did that, because to your point, I just scale it up, add some Gaussian blur, and then throw the second layer, throw the clean version.
I got the Red Giant Universe plugin that just does it for me.
But to just finish off the conversation about how Joe Buck sucks as a hustler, right? He finally gets a woman that is willing to not only pay him to have sex, right, but to pay an extra $1 for Rizzo's cab fare so he can fuck off, right?
Yeah.
And at that moment, Rizzo falls down the stairs, and you think this is the thing that is gonna fuck up this time.
Even the win is not a win right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like he has to, and he's kind of worried about going because he's like, "Are you okay? You sure you're all right?" And so they go home. But the best part about this trick is that he can't get it up.
Yeah.
Like even when it works, he gets all of it, and then he doesn't work. You know, and it's what's also fascinating to me is that this woman
who's really into him
but regardless of whether or not she's into him, she's a
no,
nice
I don't mean like sexually. I mean like she was like committed to having like a conversation and having like an evening with Joe Buck.
Even she's supportive, and she's like, don't worry about it. Like, we'll just hang out. We'll play a board game.
Yeah. We'll play Scrabble, like
whatever that
bananagrams. It looks like
or whatever.
Looks like an early bananagrams.
But she's not a grandma.
Yeah.
She's not an older woman. She's seems contemporary, at least of age wise. Yeah. But she's kind and she's supportive, and it doesn't work. So like he finally finds himself in a situation that is the one that he had drawn up for himself, when he hatched this whole plan, and it still doesn't work.
Yeah. Ready to go rapid fire on some of these other shots.
So the last little brilliant moment, rapid fire.
Yeah. You go first.
Oh no, you had them. I've talked about more or less everything I want to talk about.
All right. I'm gonna go with the easy one. Joe Buck gets to the city, and he's standing out in the crowd in that long shot.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard that is to do, to just stand out in a New York City crowd? Like, there's hundreds of people in that shot.
Yeah,
It's
and you know they
insane.
weren't all hired extras.
Yeah. No, they couldn't.
That was just a day in New York, and they managed to pull that. I mean, how long do you think that? So we're talking about the super long lens, very shallow focus.
Yeah.
He's like a whole head above everybody else in the crowd.
I'm assuming that that's like legit, like Bowfinger, like camera in a van parked at the end of the street. And it's like, all right, John Voigt.
Yeah.
Go all the way down. You just start walking up, and we're gonna roll.
Yeah, go 4 blocks that way because I'm on a 200 millimeter lens. But the way that they got him to stick out like a sore thumb on that street is great.
Orange juice on ice is nice. Orange juice on the ice. Orange juice on ice.
Other one that I really like a lot, when they're freezing in the tenement building and they're just trying to like dance, and they're dancing to that jingle about orange juice and how delicious cold orange juice is. The other one, like what is probably the most tender and touching shot of the film, is when they actually get to the mod, like the factory party, and they're on that same stairwell that he falls down later. But like Joe Buck realizes that there's like something wrong with Rizzo, and he's just like, dude, you're all sweaty. Like, what's up? And like they get like really close and embrace, and he's just like trying to wipe off the extra sweat from his hair with his shirt, and it's just like these guys are friends to the end.
Yeah, they're in it. And there are a lot of tiny little details too. We skipped over one that happens on the bus ride of the little girl reading the mod Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Which is just like, as late 60s and as a guy going to New York to be a gigolo, to be immediately confronted with Wonder Woman making the transition into being what she's like. Because that mod Wonder Woman in the late 60s was this thing where like she didn't have her powers, right? And she was just kind of a badass.
Yeah.
She was just like sort of a spy and a badass. And she didn't have powers, and she wasn't. Like the Amazons weren't there, and Steve Trevor wasn't there. It was just completely stripped down Wonder Woman, and she was a badass. And this little girl reading that comic, like with him going to New York, just utterly clueless. Like that's a detail that's cool. The there's a moment where he's getting ready to go out, and he's looking at himself in the mirror, and he's kind of flexing. And he's got an article taped to the mirror. And the headline of the article says, "This woman has $3 million."
That's right. I forgot about this shot. That's really good.
In big, bold letters, it's just that this woman has $3 million. And that's what he's taped next to his mirror as he's like, getting himself ready, which is hilarious.
I'm going to put words in your mouth because you talked to me about it yesterday, and I haven't forgotten it, and you haven't brought it up yet. But like the last shot, right, where like Rizzo is dead on the bus, and it's like on the exterior of the bus looking in at them.
Yep.
And you could just see the reflection of like the Miami palm trees and stuff like that as it's like he's staring like dead.
Yeah. It's great because we're in the bus with them the whole time,
like
and
they almost
that's
made
the
it,
only time that they did it. And it almost looks like a double exposure kind of shot too, but I think it's just a really, like, the texture of it changes very slowly, and it's kind of a longer shot. It might just be a really long dissolve.
Jamie, is that a polarizer shot, or is that like a lack of a polarizer to get one of those? Yeah. Get the lack of a polarizer. There it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you see Miami, they made it to Miami, literally pulling into Miami. And this is another thing that's, about the late 60s is the bus driver's just like, oh, there's a dead body?
Well, they have to finish off the route.
Nothing to be done about it. We'll just
we'll
we'll
deal with it when we
Miami
get to
in like
Miami.
an hour,
Yeah.
everybody. We'll don't worry about
Close
it.
his eyes.
Just
Want to close his eyes?
What?
Just reach over and close his eyes. We'll just drive on in, all right? Nothing else we can do. Okay, folks, just a little illness. We'll be in Miami in a few minutes.
Let's go to movie list here. Records are reliably pretty spotty for us on CineFix in terms of like how we tagged stuff way back. But honestly, I don't know that Midnight Cowboy has been on a list at all.
Best editing?
It needs to be.
Yeah.
We did that. I feel like we did an editing list not terribly long ago. But man, time runs together.
Yeah.
So, but editing, for sure. I mean, it's an incredibly edited film. There's like a really hyper niche kind of list of just like portrayals of memory on screen. I think might be
New York. This is a great New York movie.
Great New York movie. Top 10 New York movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it'd be hard to do like a decade like best of the '60s. Because the 60s, and here's where we can talk about the 60s.
I mean, what movie are we going to put from like 1963?
I mean, the 60s had, I don't know about 63, but even in 1969, like Wild Bunch and Easy Rider was that year.
Butch Cassidy.
Butch Cassidy was that year. Then there's like, in the 60s, there's Graduate and Bonnie and Clyde and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and Heat of the Night, Cool Hand Luke. But then even towards the beginning of the decade, you got Psycho and To Kill a Mockingbird and Lawrence of Arabia. And
Vertigo
Kubrick is doing stuff and Hitchcock and Kurosawa is like High and Low is in the 60s, which is an incredible movie. Which the 60s span a really wild time in the industry because the Hays Code's on its way out, and the beginning of the decade's got those epics like those David Lean, Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago might have been in the 60s.
Vertigo's
or
in
was
the
that
50s. I was wrong.
Yeah, but there's that, the fact that we go from Lawrence of Arabia to Midnight Cowboy in the 60s is incredible.
Yeah.
And like the David Leans and the Hitchcocks and the Kurosawas are giving way to the Mike Nichols and the Sidney Pollacks and the new Hollywood guys are starting to show up.
The Arthur Penns.
Yeah. It was a really like, it's like you hear about like, well, my grandmother was born in the Great Depression, and think about all the things that she's seen, but it's like think about everything that happened in the 60s in Hollywood. Like it's crazy. But so I don't know. I guess it would end up on best of the 1960s.
I definitely think it would.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I mean, there's also like maybe not so much a CineFix like the official movie list, but like if we ever went back to like those brilliant moments, like there's a couple of brilliant moments of Dustin Hoffman in this.
Yeah.
And cinematography,
top 10
shots.
I don't know that cinematography is great.
Grandma's Rolling Bones, bro.
Grandma's Rolling Bones is a great shot.
Yeah.
I mean, just the way that
Painting.
it might even be like
I need an oil.
Cinematography in that how different to what we talked about at the top, like reality, fantasy, and memory, like how they all three had different looks. Like I don't know if that's a color correction. Best top 10 color timing. Movies. Top 10 movies that end with Dustin Hoffman on a bus.
We're getting real
sure.
esoteric on.
But top 10 Dustin Hoffman moments we can talk now. Let's get into the one like how quotable this movie is. There's the one line that's I think in all of it. That's probably a list that it did end up on.
I'm walking here.
It might have been on the most like top 100 quotes.
Best improv lines.
We had a best improv lines, because that was a car that actually almost hit him.
Yeah, because they couldn't afford to close down the street.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm walking here. Up yours, you son of a bitch. You don't talk me that way. Get out of here.
Other favorite Ratso line of mine. Frankly, you're beginning to smell, and for a stud in New York, that's a problem.
Yeah.
What a takedown.
That's good. I do like, and I think he said it a couple of times, but Joe had the line of, I'm not a cowboy, but I am quite a stud.
Yeah.
And I think he said it a couple times in a couple of different states of mind. Like I think he was drunk one time. I think it was one time where he was super confident. One time where he was just kind of saying it just because it's like, well, this is what I'm supposed to say. I feel like that line recurred a few times, which is a good one.
Also, when Rizzo's like, loading up on charcuterie at the party, and she's just like, "Why are you stealing food? I thought I was just noticing you're out of salami. I thought somebody had to go back over to the delicatessen, bring some more back. Well, gee, it's free. You don't have to steal it." And then it's like, "Well, if it's free, then I ain't stealing."
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
I love them.
That was another one that was just a really sad scene. Just just grab some salami.
Yeah.
And he's just shoving it down his pants.
As you do.
Mm-hmm.
That's how salami is made.
I mean, mostly for me, the most famous quote in the movie is the song. Also.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Which, by the way, that was apparently Schlesinger had a choice between Everybody's Talking, which was a cover that Harry Nilsson did.
Oh.
It wasn't his original song, but he did have another song that was an original Nilsson called "I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City," which is, I think, just super on the nose.
This is on the nose too, but not in that kind of way.
No, but it's a short walk at least
Yeah.
to get to be on the nose.
Honestly, I mean, we did just like talk about how like the chorus of that song like informed the
edit.
editing.
That is our favorite part of the movie. Yeah.
One other quote that I want to do, and I also want to use this to transition into like the Jesus Bit Player Award.
Okay.
My favorite, which is Mr. O'Daniel's lonesome. I'm lonesome, so I'm drunk. I'm lonesome, so I'm a dope fiend. I'm lonesome.
Lonesome, I'm lonesome, so I'm a drunk. I'm lonesome, so I'm a dope fiend. I'm lonesome, so I'm a thief. I'm lonesome, so I'm a fornicator. A whoremonger. Poop, I say, poop.
He, by the way, is in one scene in this film, and like he owns the camera for that entire scene. You don't know if he's gonna rape this dude or what, and he's just like, "I'm gonna run you ragged."
Well, sitting there watching that scene, and like Joe walks into that place, and you immediately, because also prior to Joe walking into that place, Ratso has like taken his money, and he's like trying to panic, get back on the elevator so he can get out, because he knows like, this is the hustle that I did. I'm done with the hustle. I need to make my escape before he realizes it. So you know something's wrong, and then he opens the door, and you meet that guy, and he's just gross and sweaty and in a bathrobe, and like, and his eyes are he's so clearly crazy, and you know something's gonna go wrong. And I honestly, I'd forgotten about the twist of like, he's a Jesus guy.
Yeah. Specifically, he's Catholic. Because he's just going crazy. Because like, this isn't the only crazy Catholicism in this thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, let's not forget, the other fucking bad time that Joe Buck sucks at being a hustler, right? Which is like where he goes to have dinner with that guy, and then they go back to his hotel room, and that guy starts talking to his mother, and then he's like, I gotta go, and then like he gives him the saint of he gives him his medal of St. Christopher because he's gonna travel, because he just figured he could, get a couple extra bucks before they get on the road to Miami.
Yeah.
And then like he ends up punching that guy in the face. And then the most fucking Catholic thing of all time is a guy gets punched in the face because because his hiring a gigolo goes south, and he thanks him. He thanks him for punching him in the face.
He's just sitting there, just blood all over everything. Just, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that was a wild scene, and that even then, like to the point of how nothing goes quite the way that it's meant to. Like, he's come around to the point of like, he will use violence on somebody, he will inflict more pain and tragedy on somebody, and then he does it to a guy that ends up thanking him for it, which is a whole other level of sad. Like, it's bizarre. Yeah. This movie's really good.
I know.
Yeah.
You gonna let go of that table? Now you gonna let go of that table, you wanna bust its skull.
You got any things you didn't know?
I got some TorFs for you. I got some true or falses.
Dan's taking some time off, but we will continue to TorF.
We will continue to TorF. All right, so I got
the segment formerly known as Things You Didn't Know.
Yeah, I got 3 for you.
Okay.
All right, ready? Because of his willing to work for SAG minimum and his previous experience on Gunsmoke, John Voight was the only actor considered for Joe Buck.
Oh, because he was cheap.
Cheap and look good in a cowboy and look good on camera in a cowboy uniform.
Oh man, I'm gonna go true.
False.
Yeah.
The role was originally offered to Michael Cesarin, who didn't take it because his management wanted $100,000 for the role, despite his verbal agreement to do it for 17, and his acting schedule actually they would have had to push back the shoot. So
too expensive. Had to push it.
He fell out of it.
Okay, no, I see how you're approaching these TorFs now, though.
Yeah,
like,
I'm actually trying to write them in a way.
You gotta write some specificity in there to make. Okay.
All right. Dustin Hoffman was nervous that he wouldn't get the role based on like his clean-cut image from The Graduate. So he decided to, when he went to meet Schlesinger, he was like, meet me at this automat in Midtown, like late at night. And like, so like Rizzo just kind of like emerged from like, like the griminess of the actual environment. And that's how he got the role.
False.
That's actually true.
See, now I'm out thinking myself.
Yeah, now you are.
That felt true.
It was
It
true.
felt true because of the Marathon Man story.
Yeah.
With him and what's his name, Laurence Olivier.
Yeah.
The Have You Tried Acting, my boy. Like,
exactly.
yeah.
So like that's him like being method as
That
fuck.
one felt true, and then I outthought myself. All right, I'm 0 for 2.
All right, finally. Thanks to really positive test screenings, UA knew they had a hit on their hand and decided not to rock the boat with bad press and went with the X rating.
False.
That is correct. That is correct.
I am true in saying that's false.
You are correct.
Yeah.
It is false.
It was a self-inflicted X rating.
It was a self-inflicted X rating, but according to a interview Dustin Hoffman did with Entertainment Weekly, he said when we started having screenings, people would get up and leave. They were so offended, so they were real nervous that they had a bomb, and it turned out to be a Best Picture winner that made a ton of money because everybody went to see it.
And we're still talking about it.
Terrific shirt.
Are you speaking to me?
Well, I was just admiring that colossal shirt. I mean, that is one hell of a shirt. I bet you paid a pretty price for it, am I right?
Oh, I ain't cheap.
Yeah, birds.
I say it's all right shirt.
I like birds.
Who's your MVP of the movie?
I want to say Schlesinger.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, maybe John Voigt, because like this is clearly the best John Voigt has ever been. But like Schlesinger, like would this movie exist if like Schlesinger didn't put it through? And like from a directing standpoint, like all two incredible performances, like such great cinematography. They had no money. So like think about all these amazing shots that we've been talking about in this movie, and it's not like they can meticulously set them up. They had to go out into the fucking streets of New York City and literally steal them.
Yep.
And then on top of all of that, like this such great music, like the song, right? Like it all just ties together in this complete package that is fundamentally a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. Like Dustin Hoffman is going to have literally dozens of more iconic performances.
Right.
You know, John Voigt did incredible here, but like this is the best he's ever going to be.
Yep.
It's not like, so is that because Schlesinger
got all of John Voigt out of John Voigt?
That's who, and like, I mean, he got the statue for it. So like, that's who I think won it.
I don't know what their working dynamic was. I can't really argue with any of that, but I got to give it to Hugh A. Robinson, the editor.
Yeah. Okay.
I just like he's an interesting guy because he didn't work. He cut Shaft a few years after this.
Oh, fascinating.
He's in fact the first African American guy to be nominated for Best Editing.
Oh wow.
But he cut Shaft a few years after this, and then he went into directing, and so most of his IMDb is like directing TV a lot. So he didn't do much more, which I always find fascinating. He was just this guy that did one bit of incredible work, and then didn't do a ton else. Like I'm sure the work is good and it's solid or whatever, but nothing that's as iconic as this movie. But I can't in good conscience give the MVP to anybody else after the whole conversation about like I think it's better than the script. I think the editing is better than the script.
I agree.
Which is such a strange, I don't think I've ever said that about a movie specifically, but like I think the editing, again, like the script is good because of what it leaves out.
Yeah.
And the editing is incredible because of the gaps in the script that it fills.
Yeah, of what it puts in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I got to give it to the editor.
All right, let's get
Hugh A. Robinson, ladies and gentlemen, MVP.
Amazing. Deservedly so.
Yep.
She's hooked.
Like why a cowboy?
I'd say she was good for $10, but I'll ask for 20.
Why a cowboy whore?
Did you know we were gonna make it?
Is this rebootable? I think not.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Hollywood
so
is
many
that culturally
movies,
bankrupt
but
right now.
Movies in the late 60s were so very of their time.
Tell that to the guys who are making the new Easy Rider.
I'm sure we will at some point, given the chance to talk to those guys.
Yeah, if we ever got the chance to talk to the people who are making the Easy Rider.
Isn't that right, Jamie?
Yeah.
That is an inside joke that's staying in the edit. But I don't want it to be remade.
I don't either.
I mean, I think you absolutely could, and you could set it in. Maybe you set it in a slightly different time period. Maybe you set it in the early. I don't think you can do it and set it present day.
Yep.
No. Maybe you could do it in like
the tenement buildings that they were living in are.
Oh man.
Millions of dollars. Yeah. Millions of dollars now.
Yeah.
That New York is long dead.
That New York is gone.
Yeah.
Like maybe the what's the HBO series in the 80s?
The Deuce.
The Deuce. Like you could probably set it in that time.
Yeah. Well,
but not much after that.
Yeah, The Deuce is all about that area's transition from the Midnight Cowboys time to like the modern one.
Once Disney moves into Times Square, you can't make this movie again.
Since we can agree that this movie is not rebootable, right? Let's quickly get in the Nick Cageification of this. I'm gonna just go crazy with my recommendation, and because I think it's absurd that this movie would ever be remade. So if we are going to remake it, I want to remake it under the most absurd premises possible. So I want to have Nicolas Cage play both roles, Rizzo and Joe Buck.
Got it.
And what I want is a modern.
You don't have to figure that like I'm gonna stop you. Like
I want modern older Nicolas Cage, a more older seasoned Nicolas Cage to play the Rizzo, and I need him to be de-aged to late 80s Nick Cage. Like we're talking like Valley Girl.
Yeah.
Late 80s Nick Cage, like Moonstruck Nick Cage to play the young Joe Buck. Does it work? No. But it was never going to work.
But yeah, this thing's not going to work to begin with. If we're going to remake it, we might as well remake it with 2 Nick Cages. Yeah,
this is my favorite bit, so I'm gonna come correct every time.
I think the only the less extreme version of that, I think what was the guy's name? O'Daniels?
Yeah.
I think you make him.
Yeah.
Like that would be a wonderful little Nick Cage cameo, because when you do remake Midnight Cowboy, it's going to be an HBO series. And there's going to be a whole episode that Nicolas Cage gets nominated for an Emmy for outstanding guest star on a limited run, whatever. Beef up that role a little bit for that one episode, and put Nick Cage as the crazy.
You know what? I like that.
First hustle.
I think you're right. I think him just one's like in the TV miniseries that is Midnight Cowboy as the O'Daniel character. I'll take that.
Yep.
Right.
I think that's the only way it gets better with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad we settled that so quickly. So let's find out where this went. Where did you have it on your list? Because I didn't have it on mine.
I think I'm the only one that actually
had it.
We're talking about this. The providence of the reason that we're talking about this excellent film today is because it was number 95 on my list.
Just snuck onto your list.
Just snuck onto it.
Wasn't on mine. I think we can assume it wasn't on Alex's or Dan's.
I don't think so.
Dan's not.
If it was on any of 2 of our lists, there was a good chance it would have made the top 100.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess. I have no idea how the algorithm works. But let's see where it ranks. Midnight Cowboys, number 262 on our list.
It's the 262nd best movie of all time, according to you, me, Dan, and Alex.
Yeah, on the strength of you ranking it 95,
you know what?
It gets to be 262.
We did like an hour and 10 on this. I honestly.
At least.
And let me put it to you this way. Do you regret not putting it on your list?
Yes and no. I regret is too strong a word. I could for sure... If I'm relisting my whole 100 list, I could think of a couple that I put on my list that I'd swap Midnight Cowboy.
If we watched this movie like 6 months ago before we did the list, would it have made the cut?
If it were fresher in my mind, probably. Yeah. I think as we get further into this whole process, we're going to run into some movies on my list that I'm like, did I just feel like I had to put that on my list? I don't really like this movie that much. There's some of those that, Midnight Cowboy could have for sure taken spot.
Over.
Yeah. At which case, if it would have been both of our lists, it would have been like, maybe $1.90, something like that.
I feel bad that it's 95 on mine. Now I'm trying to think
just
about
having talked about it for an hour and a half.
Movies.
Yeah. But I tell you what, that's going to do it for this week. Thank you for joining us for the CineFix Not Top 100. Thank you, as always, to producer Tayo Yakin, to Marian Franzen, who's working, Jamie Parslow right there behind camera, specifically not Dan. Thanks to Alex for, you get well. Get well
Rest
soon.
up. Can't wait to have you back on the next episode.
Next week, we're talking about The Fly.
Ooh, sweet.
The Fly. It's going to be another not top 100.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that.
I just want to make sure that people know that this isn't just a YouTube video, and if you want to not watch us, make sure you subscribe to CineFix Top 100 Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Well, come back next week. We're going to talk about The Fly. Sweet.